Hi, I'm Rachel, and today I'm going to show you a reinforced fantail stitch. Now, the regular crochet fantail stitch has a 4-row repeat, which is what you see here. When I tried this stitch using a bamboo cotton blend, well, this was the result. Not exactly what I was going for. So I've added a row to the wrong side to fix that little problem, and now the right side looks, well, right. And because I'm using this in a striped afghan, I'm not going to be starting from a chain, and I'll show you how I've dealt with that as well. So let's get to it. The repeat is a multiple of 6 plus 3. Start with a chain 1 and single crochet in the first stitch. Skip 3 stitches, and in the next stitch, work 4 double crochets, chain 1, and 4 more double crochets in that stitch to make a fan. 2, 3, and 4, chain 1, then 1, 2, 3, and 4. Check them out. Skip 2 stitches, make a single crochet in the next stitch. You'll skip 2 more stitches and make a fan in the next stitch. Since these are pretty wide fans, 8 double crochets rather than 6, I started on a base of pretty wide stitches here. So these 8 double crochet fans work really well with the slip stitch row we're going to add later. But if you wanted to make a smaller fan, you could certainly adapt that. Skip 2, do a single crochet. We'll skip 2 more and do another fan, and I'm just going to skip ahead to the very end so you can see how we finish up the row. So there's the 8th double crochet in that fan, which is the last double crochet in the row. And finally we skip 3 and single crochet in the very last stitch. If you wonder why we skip 3 stitches at the beginning and end and only 2 the rest of the time, it's just whatever looks best on the rows I'm working on top of. I've changed colors for row 2, which is nice but not really necessary. So start with a chain 3 and then double crochet in that first stitch. And make these stitches just a bit loose if you're going to do the reinforcing row. Now chain 2 and make those chains a bit loose as well. Now skipping the first 4 stitches of the fan, single crochet in the chain space at the top of the fan, chain 2 more, skip the rest of the fan, then make a V in the single crochet between fans. The V here is a double crochet, chain 1, and then another double crochet. And chain 2 more, and single crochet in the chain 1 space at the top of the next fan. Chain 2, make a V between fans. Remember our V here is double crochet, chain 1, double crochet. So the pattern between the tops of fans is chain 2, V-stitch, chain 2. In the last fan of the row, use single crochet in the chain 1 space at the top, chain 2 more, make a double crochet into that single crochet at the very end of the row, and then normally you would finish that off with 1 more double crochet. However, if we're going to do the reinforcing on the other side, we're going to finish it off just a little bit differently. We still have 1 double crochet in that single crochet, but then we chain 3 and make a slip stitch in that last single crochet instead, so that we end up with our yarn on the bottom when we turn. And once we turn, we'll make a slip stitch through the front loop of the first double crochet in the fan and the bottom of the second double crochet in the V row. And you can see this is starting to stitch the last 2 rows together. Now do the same thing with the next pair of stitches. Slip stitch through the front loop of the next double crochet in the fan and the top of the same double crochet in the V row. For the next 2 stitches, we join the front loop of the double crochet in the fan to the back bump of the next 2 chains in the V row. So now you skip that single crochet at the top of the fan, and you go ahead and slip stitch through the front loops of the double crochets and into the back bumps of the next two chains. And as you might notice, I have made my chains in the V-rows too tight, and you can see it's a bit difficult for me to get my hook through. So for the next two double crochets in the fan, you work through the front loop of those fan double crochets and into the next double crochet of the V row. And you can just insert your hook wherever it's easiest in that V double crochet, as long as that first slip stitch is close to the top of the double crochet and the last slip stitch is closer to the bottom. Then skip the single crochet between fans. Then we're just going to do the same thing with each repeat of the row. So I'll skip to the second half and meet you there. So here we are at the last fan, and this really is a straightforward continuation of what we've been doing. Stitching front loops of double crochets on the fan, first into the back bumps of the two chains, and finally into the next double crochet. We can just go ahead and end right there, trim off the ends, and just weave in when we're ready. And I'm going to demonstrate the next pattern row on the blanket I'm currently working. So join the next color, chain 3, which will count as the first double crochet, and work 3 more double crochet to form a half fan. Here I've done it right into the first stitch, but if you like, you can make those 3 double crochet between stitches instead of awkwardly going into that first stitch. Skip the chain space and single crochet into that first single crochet of the V row, sliding your hook between the yarn from that single crochet and the slip stitch row behind it. So that first sort of half fan is 4 double crochet. Next, you're going to skip the chain 2 space from the V row and work a fan into the V. So at this point, we're essentially doing the same thing as we did in the first row, except that we're now working in previous pattern rows, and the repetition is moved over by half. Moving to the end of the row where we just did our last single crochet, and all that's left is to finish up with that half fan, which is 4 double crochets into the last stitch, or if you prefer, 3 double crochets between the last 2 stitches and 1 in the last stitch. For the next pattern row, chain 1 and single crochet on the top of that half fan that you made in the last row. Then you chain 2, make a V-stitch between the fans. Starting to sound familiar now? Yeah, it's the same as row 2, just moved over by half a repetition. So finish the V with that second double crochet, chain 2, and single crochet in the chain space of that next fan. Chain 2 more, make another V between fans, and you get the idea. So moving on to the end of the row, chain 2, one last V, so that's the double crochet, chain 1, another double crochet, and chain 2 more, and finally a single crochet at the top of the last half fan. So when you start the slip stitch row from a half fan, you work the second double crochet from the half fan into the first chain. And then, because there are only 2 unworked double crochets left in that group, you're going to work them into the first double crochet of the V. By the way, I've changed colors just to show what's going on in this row. In real life, you wouldn't want to change color for a reinforcing row because you don't want to be able to see it from the right side. That would be a little messy. So from this point, everything's going to be the same as the last slip stitch row. So I'll skip to the end of this row just to show how it's finished. So starting in the last space between fans, we're ending on a half fan just like we started. So there are only 3 fan double crochets to work with. The first 2 you're going to stitch through that last V double crochet, then skip a chain from the V row and work your last fan double crochet into the last chain stitch of that row. And that's the end of this second slip stitch row. And the last row I'll show you here is basically the same as the first row. You start with a single crochet in the very first stitch, then work a full fan into the next V stitch. Then you're going to single crochet in the next single crochet of the last V row, and you're just going to keep going like that. And then we end the row basically the same way. One last fan into the last V, and then single crochet in the very last stitch. And you can keep repeating rows 2 through 7 until you've reached the height you want, ending on a V row and finishing up with one last slip stitch row if you want.